The most revealing part was what happened after my no. In less than 72 hours, the pattern unfolded before me, clear as day. Dear daughter, it's early morning, and the silence is so profound that it almost feels tangible. The pen glides across the paper, and I'm writing this so you can understand the layers behind certain behaviors that may seem harmless. At that moment in my life, I was exhausted. A tired mind, a heavy heart. There was something in me that craved approval, and when I finally found the courage to set a boundary, I thought everything would be fine. It was just a simple rejection, but the response I received was a whirlwind dressed as love. We were talking and I could barely finish my sentence. His expression changed, as if a button had been pressed. You can't just leave me like this. The tone was one of concern, but there was a weight behind the word, leave. With every moment, I felt a growing pressure, as if he were trying to pull me back into the same cycle. And then, the message that my no was an attack began to resonate. I'm just worried about you. That phrase echoed, but what did it really mean? I can't handle your autonomy. So, I moved on to the next day. Messages, calls, persistent questions. Are you okay? Why didn't you respond? I found myself wrapped in a subtle web of guilt, where my space was disregarded, and I didn't realize it, until frustration began to build up inside me, confusing affection with control. On the third day, the pattern was complete. The hidden contempt, the silence that went from being comforting to becoming a form of punishment. The guilt weighed heavy, and I wondered if I had overreacted. But in reality, I was just trying to protect myself. It sounded like love, but it meant possessiveness. Listen carefully. If you notice intense reactions after a certain limit, take note. If questions turn into accusations, reflect. And if you feel guilty for wanting space, it's time to create a shield. Use this as protection. My well-being is a priority. And if you can't accept that, we need to rethink our relationship. In the next account, I will talk about how a small conversation can turn into an emotional battleground. On the fourth day, the routine took a new turn. I was trying to understand what was happening. With each unanswered message, I felt an even greater pressure to justify my choice. Love seemed to be turning into a burden, and the pressure from others' feelings became unbearable. For the first time, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about relationships and commitment. His words became more insistent, like an echo in a small space. Do you want me to worry? And at that moment, I realized the blurred connection between concern and control. He wasn't just worried. He was trying to shape my reality. Each argument felt like a tile on a path I didn't want to walk. But who am I to challenge that? And I didn't realize that was the silent trap. One day, during coffee, the atmosphere grew heavy. I looked at him, his face reflecting a mix of confusion and frustration. It was an expression I had seen before. Something inside me agreed, as if saying this discussion could be resolved. I'm just trying to help you, he shot back. And in that instant, the word help sounded like a disguised offense. His idea of help was no longer an act of love. It was becoming a means of emotional dominance. The room felt warm, and everything seemed suffocating. The walls began to close in. My stomach was in knots of anguish as I tried to explain my position. I just need space, I said more firmly than I thought I could. But he leaned in, his eyes fixed on me, reflecting a depth that bordered on possessiveness. But why can't you understand that I care? And I didn't realize that his attempt to understand was, in fact, a way to silence me. His words were there, but the meaning was tangled in a need for control. In that moment, I realized that the love I was expecting might be distorted. He was more interested in my behavior than in me as a person. That conversation dragged on, leading me to revisit memories of a childhood where my space was always invaded. When I said no, I received disapproving looks. The conditioning was deep. The instinct to please was much stronger than the desire to assert myself. If I spoke up, chaos would erupt again, and the pain of rejection could be unbearable. That old feeling was still pulsing inside me, revealing its claws. At home, I allowed myself to feel the fragility of the moment. I looked in the mirror, examining the marks of the internal struggle. Who am I really? It wasn't just a question of identity. It was a quest for freedom. Deep down, I longed to reclaim the autonomy that I seemed to have lost along the way. In every ignored message, in every missed call, an echo of my own voice faded away. Finally, on the fifth day, I decided to take action. Inertia had transformed into determination. I sat down at the table, paper in front of me. I began to write a letter. Words danced on the page, telling my raw and unfiltered truth. My love should not be conditioned on your insecurities, I wrote, almost as a powerful affirmation. My space is sacred. This expression was liberating, yet at the same time, terrifying. The fear of his reaction was palpable. A part of me worried that this revelation could trigger more control or even anger. But I knew that if I didn't set these boundaries, I would be condemning myself to live in a cycle of guilt and despair. And I didn't realize that I had already spent too much time in this vicious cycle. I mustered my courage and sent the letter. My hands trembled, but at the same time, there was a growing lightness in my chest. Then came the response, a cold message, devoid of understanding, full of demands. But this time, instead of giving in, I took a deep breath and drew a line. I'm not going to discuss this. My well-being comes first. The silence that followed was deafening. Like an empty echo, it resonated in the depths of my mind. However, I learned a valuable lesson. Even in silence, I had power. In the days that followed, the pattern began to crumble. Slowly, the pressure eased, and I could see the raw, unfiltered truth. What seemed like love was, in reality, a test of endurance. In my next entry, I'll talk about how facing painful truths can open doors to genuine and healthy love. The silence echoed like a scream in its absence. My heart, once trapped under the weight of that relationship, began to loosen, but something still troubled me. A small inner voice whispered, "Now what?" I was unarmed, feeling the new space around me, but not knowing how to fill it. Freedom was unsettling yet empowering. In the following days, the house felt strange, empty, but not lonely. The walls, which had once been witnesses to a distorted love, now seemed to listen to my breath. My habits changed. I woke up early, walked around the neighborhood, feeling the fresh air like a renewing embrace. Each step moved me further away from what had been. It was during one of those walks that I found a small bookstore, tucked away on a quiet street. The smell of paper and ink flooded my senses. I walked in, drawn by a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. The books on the shelves seemed to whisper secrets, and I found myself exploring titles that piqued my curiosity. I picked up a volume on healthy relationships and ran my fingers over the cover, absorbing every word that promised understanding and growth. I settled into a comfy corner and started to read. The pages spoke about boundaries, about the importance of recognizing and valuing one's own essence. Each sentence resonated deeply within me. The author described experiences that were not so different from my own, and as I progressed through the reading, I realized I was not alone. Other women had also struggled against possessiveness disguised as love, and then reflection took over me. I didn't need to carry the burden of the past. The idea of love had changed. It was no longer a gentle touch that turned into pain. Love should be light, not an emotional weight. It was a simple concept, but radical for me. I had always associated love with sacrifice, with giving up what I truly desired. But what if love was a safe space? As I left the bookstore, an involuntary smile crept onto my face. Each day, I allowed myself to experience new emotions. It was then that the desire to reconnect with what truly interested me began to awaken within me. Painting, which I had set aside for so long, called back to my creative spirit. I picked up brushes and paints, and art became more than a hobby. It became a form of communication with myself. Each brushstroke released feelings that had been stored away, triggering a journey of self-discovery. But the shadows of the past wouldn't disappear so easily. One day, while I was working on a new canvas, I received a message from him. My heart raced. An automatic reaction. "Are you still thinking about us?" The words seemed to traverse space in search of control, an echo of the old dynamic. Like a puppet, I could have danced to his rhythm, but now I recognized the trap, and I didn't realize that the answer to that question shouldn't come from a place of vulnerability, but from a state of empowerment. I took a deep breath and thought about everything I had learned. Instead of giving in to the urge to justify or argue, I wrote a clear message. I'm focused on myself now. What we had no longer serves me. As I hit send, I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Over time, the messages began to cease, and with them, the pressure. I started to rediscover joy in the little things. The aroma of fresh coffee in the morning, sunlight filtering through the trees, the music playing on the radio. Reconnecting with the joy of simple details brought a sense of renewal. And so, as time passed, I realized that freedom was not just about being alone, but about being whole. I could choose who I wanted to be. In one of those moments of clarity, I made a bold decision. I signed up for an art course. Fear and anxiety mixed with excitement. As I entered the room, I was greeted by unfamiliar faces, but I no longer felt that previous panic of not belonging. I felt that I was there to create, to share my inner world with others. With each class, my love for art grew, and the connection with people who were also seeking to express their emotions became palpable. Then, in one of the exercises, we were encouraged to share our work. I looked at the canvas painted with so many feelings. All my insecurities, everything I had kept inside, exposed before strangers. When I looked back, I saw genuine looks of appreciation, and in that moment, I realized that I no longer needed anyone's validation. That room became a refuge. The encouraging environment served as a constant reminder that I was on the right path. And there, among paints and papers, I began to understand that true love did not require control or possession. It blossoms in the freedom of being who we are. In the following days, I continued to immerse myself in colors and shapes, but also in my own story. And as I let go of the layers of pain, something new began to emerge. In the next story, I will share about the day I finally left behind the chains of the past and embraced the possibility of a love that would respect my essence. In that magical moment, surrounded by the soft light filtering through the art room window, I realized that true freedom lay in allowing myself to feel, in making space for each emotion I used to suffocate. It was as if the layers of pain were slowly peeling away, revealing a version of myself I had forgotten. With each brush stroke, a part of my past gained shape and color. Memories of insecurities, heartbreaks, and a love that could no longer sustain itself began to transform into something beautiful. A new narrative was unfolding before me, each color a valuable lesson learned. And then, the idea that true love could be a sanctuary began to resonate in my mind, a place where we could be vulnerable, but within a safe space, without expectations or possessions. Meanwhile, new friendships began to blossom around me, open-hearted companions who lived their own struggles and triumphs, each bringing with them stories as complex as my own. In one of those moments of sharing between screens and paints, one of them, Clara, opened up about her own journey, and I saw reflections of myself in her words. She spoke of a relationship that began like a fairy tale, but quickly turned into a subtle trap. How I longed for love, even when it felt like it was suffocating me, Clara said, her eyes shining with the pain and wisdom of someone who had fought internal battles. In that moment, something deep connected our experiences. We were two women seeking to rediscover our voices amid the chaos of others' expectations. Throughout that course, our friendship blossomed. We would sit together after class, sharing not just our works, but also our fears and hopes. She encouraged me to explore repressed emotions, to confront the shadows that still insisted on following me. The honest dialogue between us was like a breath of fresh air in a world polluted by old beliefs. And then, there was that day when we decided to do a different exercise. Clara suggested that we create a canvas together, blending our ideas, colors, and sensations. Sitting on the floor, surrounded by paints and brushes, we began talking about what love truly meant. It's not the absence of conflict, Clara reminded me. It's the presence of respect. Her words echoed within me like an unexpected mantra. It was a simple yet powerful concept. I had always associated love with complete surrender, with self-sacrifice. But now I saw that true love could be, above all, a respectful partnership where both could shine. As we continued to work on the canvas, something different began to emerge. It was not just a piece of art. It was a visual representation of our emotional evolution. We colored with the shades of acceptance, forgiveness, and self-worth. And amidst that collective creation, I felt something rise within me, like a sun rising after a long night. Looking at that canvas, I saw not just paint and shapes. I saw a reflection of everything we were, a testament to what it meant to face the shadows and find the light. In that moment, I understood that the freedom I had sought was not just in distancing myself from toxic relationships, but in the ability to love myself unconditionally. When we bring forth the most authentic parts of ourselves, we create space for true love to flourish, a love that respects, supports, and allows for mutual growth. However, as I absorbed this new understanding, a part of me still hesitated. There was a shadow of doubt that insisted on reminding me of what I had already faced, and I didn't realize that this resistance was the last remnant of a cycle that needed to be broken. Deep down, I knew that the path ahead could be daunting, but now I had the support and strength necessary to confront the unknown. Art, friendship, and self-discovery had become my pillars. I decided then to take a step further. It was time to return to my space, to look at everything I had experienced, and to accept that I, too, was worthy of building a new love. In the next account, I will share the day I decided to open my heart again, teetering between fear and hope, ready to embrace whatever came my way.